You are listening to Sustainable from AgriBusiness Global, covering the crop protection, biologicals, and plant health markets advancements toward a healthier planet. Hello, and welcome to the Sustainable Podcast by AgriBusiness Global. My name is Sarah Webb, and I'm editor of AgriBusiness Global and host of today's episode. In this segment, I speak with Jason McGarrh, VP of Agriculture at Locus FS, about the value of biosurfactants, recent innovations in the space, how biosurfactants can address challenges like resistance management, and more. Thanks for joining. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today. My first question is, can you discuss a little bit about how biosurfactants work and how they fit into an integrated management approach?
Yes, biosurfactants are becoming more of a buzzword. We're taking our fermented the surfactants come through fermentation through either yeast or bacteria, and we're integrating those technologies into hard chemistries or into traditional surfactants. So really what we're doing is we're enhancing what's already there. So this isn't a standalone where we're selling it completely as a standalone biosurfactant. I mean, they do have a lot of benefits because they are more green than traditional chemistry, but we're taking that and we're putting it into foliar fertilizers. We're using that in stress mitigators. We're putting that into adjuvants. When we're thinking about biosurfactants, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And I think that's where a lot of people, as we talk through this, this is an opening question, but just because it's something new, why should we use it? So that's really where we start when we're going into product development using these technologies.
Can you talk to me a little bit about, in which agricultural applications biosurfactants tend to provide the greatest value?
Yeah, we see them in soil type biosurfactants where, like with us, we have a product that we formulated to go through to open up the micropores in the soil. So, I see that as a place. I see that it also is a place. I think as time goes on, what you're going to see with biosurfactants, you're going to see them actually being added into formulations of chemistry as well as adjuvants, just because of how they work. And this is very similar to what adjuvant companies say with traditional adjuvants, but how it helps cut through the wax on the leaves, and the micelles on the molecules are smaller. So you're able to get more chemical into the plants or into or even with fertility for that matter, get it into the soil. At Locus, I had an idea, which we haven't until recently gone too far into ag adjuvants, but in oil and gas, they're using biosurfactants to go through shale, like rock, in the formations to with traditional formulations of chemistry that they inject into wells. And I was like, guys, if this will go through rocks, it'll go through leaves. We're seeing really good results, and your viewers, if the other companies, there's several others that are using biosurfactants, but we're seeing a really big improvement with weed kill with herbicides. I mean, there's different studies. There was a study from University of Arkansas done several years back talking about Parma amaranth pigweed untreated could steal 40 to 70% of your yield. So with all the weed resistances and tolerances that are occurring right now, I definitely see a place for biosurfactants in those formulations. One, to extend the technology that's on the market, but then two, to improve the efficacy. Because, I mean, I've been through this multiple times since I was in college, where we went through Roundup resistance, and you're seeing dicamba resistance, and you're seeing Liberty. So I really see the niche with biosurfactants with hard chemistry. I mean, and there's also a place for it in organic farming as well.
Okay, and building on that, in your experience, have you heard or seen any common misconceptions that exist surrounding biosurfactants?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some silver bullet claims. It kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier, Sarah. You got to think about what problem you're trying to solve, and whether it's biosurfactants or actual biology, because we're a biology company as well. I mean, it matters there's a lot of different benefits to these types of materials, but you can't claim everything on it. I mean, it's like water. Water is ingredient of life. Me and you need it. Our bodies are composed mainly of water, but you got to be careful with what your claims are in this business. And I think that's kind of what happened is when biosurfactants were really getting started, people kind of had this silver bullet approach and just claimed a whole bunch of different things. And I don't think the expectations were set the right way.
Okay. And, in addition to kind of managing expectations, are there any other work that companies can do to kind of demystify these products or, how can companies really educate growers on the true benefits of biosurfactants?
Well, there's a couple of kind of regressals. So that you have the misconceptions and then also the cost. So that this is biosurfactants are not ever going to be at the same price point as conventional or synthetic surfactants. So what I would educate people on is the use rates are lower. So like to
Mhm.
give you an example, our use rates like on some of our soil surfactants are 2 ounces an acre. Like that's really crazy when you're thinking that an acre is 43,000 square feet roughly. So the use rate is very low. And then what I would add to that is when you're choosing a company for anything, see if they've invested in data. Like we spend a significant amount of money in budgets making sure that what we say is is real and that we see it in the field, and then we do side by side demonstrations in the field with farmers. And when it comes to surfactants, and I'll lead into this. This is something else to pay attention to. And every farmer, especially when you're spraying things or putting things in tanks for a use with fertility, you want to make sure there's compatibility. If you've never plugged up a big spray boom, 90-foot long, it's not a fun experience. So, there's compatibility questions. Sir, you've been in this a long time as well as your viewers. There's certain things to look for. But if a company's not investing in researching their own products or understanding their own products, that's a good indicator. But most do that, I would say.
Okay, and kind of building on that, is there specific evidence or field data that customers are asking for before they decide to adopt biosurfactant product?
I think that the data really just says, I'm not lying to you. And then they want to
Mhm.
try it on their own farm
Okay.
because there are different soil types. But I'm really excited for where this business is going. It's enhancing what we already have. And when you're looking at chemistry, it takes so much longer to get active ingredients today than what it did, 30, 40 years ago.
From your perspective, are there any or what are some of the recent innovations that are making biosurfactants more scalable and cost competitive?
I would say fermentation, technology around fermentation and economies of scale. That's really the differentiator, larger batch sizes as well as different bacterias or yeasts that are more efficient. And with biosurfactant specifically, and this is just for education. There's other, like I said, other organizations in this business, but really it all starts in the lab. You gotta when I first got here, I was like, let's just go sell some stuff, and because I was a sales manager before I became a vice president, and it really starts in the lab of how you design your ferment. You're building your formulas or it's like making a cake in a sense. So basically, the researchers make the recipe and then production makes the cake, but on a really big scale. So identifying the organisms or the yeast and then how you ferment that and then how you do that in the most scalable way. That's really what's leading to biosurfactants, at least with us being more competitive.
Okay, that's good to know. I like that analogy a lot. And, taking just a quick step back here, we've talked a little bit about, some of the barriers to broader adoption, but are there any other barriers that are kind of inhibiting wider adoption of these products?
I would say right now, and I'm not trying to be negative, it's just the world we live in, but there is a liquidity crisis in agriculture. So if things cost more money than what they're already using, why would you use it? That kind of goes in, which we haven't launched yet, is we're adding biosurfactants in with like methylated seed oils, crop oil concentrates, non-oleic surfactants. They're already using these materials or these adjuvants. So we're just enhancing them and trying to keep the price very similar to what the market is. And I think that's really where the adoption comes in the future. If we were trying to, or an organization rather, was trying to sell a biosurfactant for 30 or 40% more than whatever a commodity type surfactant was, I think it would be challenging right now, unless you were organic. But the other goes into, you look at like California specifically, they have really bad salt problems because of their water and they're in droughts, and that's where our vegetables were grown for the most part. So they need surfactants, they need soil conditioners, they need to get the most out of their irrigation. I definitely see that market continuing to grow for the industry.
Just adding to that, can you expand a little bit on how biosurfactants can help address some of those future challenges like, resistance management, climate resilience, and input efficiency?
Yes. So I'll give you two different examples of real world problems with soils and compacted soils. So in California, when you were to go into like a bedded up crop under plastic like strawberries, whenever they're irrigating and they're putting fertility and chemicals through the drip, all of that build up there, I guess is what I would call it. It makes those beds like turn to concrete. When you add biosurfactants to that, it makes it mellow like potting soil. Because what it's doing, going back to earlier in this conversation, it's helping open up those micropores. It's allowing water to get into the bed, and then in return, you're getting more water use efficiency. You're getting more efficiency out of your fertility. A farmer actually was a customer in California talking about he was able to drastically cut his fertility in his water because he wasn't having water go out the sides of the beds into the furrows. He was holding more of that water. And the other one I would say, and this one's kind of personal to me, not supposed to be get personal in business, but it's personal to me because I love this part of the country. I love California too, by the way, but I really love the Great Plains. But the Ogallala is in a bad place. I don't know if you've read much into that. There's places in western Kansas that they say have 30 years left of water. And I've been out there, and you can drive a dune buggy through the Arkansas River because the river's dried up, and they need soil conditioners. They need biosurfactants. They need things to help get as much as they can out of their water. And we did that in Colorado a couple of years ago across the state line, where they were running a biosurfactant or product unpacked through a pivot, and they were able to add more water per irrigation without it running out of the field because they were injecting it in. So I see that as another opportunity, but it goes back to tiny, and what is the problem we're trying to solve? We're trying to get more water in that profile, have an easier path for those roots to establish, and that equates to yield. If it doesn't yield better, why do it? But overall plant health with biosurfactants in those environments, it improves drastically.
Absolutely. Well said. And, thank you so much for joining me today, Jason, and for all of your insights. We really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Sustainable Podcast by AgriBusiness Global. I'm your host, Sarah Webb. Until next time. Thank you for listening to Sustainable from AgriBusiness Global. You can find more podcasts, videos, news, e-newsletters, event, and webinar information at agribusinessglobal.com.